A lot of people know about my story in government contracting, specifically winning my first government contract for road salt, for example, or how I went on to win 32 contracts worth over $15 million working for a small government contractor. I've since gone on to help other people, new GovCons in the space, learn how to bid and win, start bidding on and winning their first government contracts for their business. However, what internal, I guess just going inwards more this year, especially as I'm dealing with, breathing issues and health issues as I'm trying to work my way through that and continue to do so. I continue to be more introspective. And part of that has led me to get more clear about who I believe I can help the most and what I get most excited about in government contracting specifically, and specifically speaking to new GovCons, new small GovCons. So I realized, and this comes out in many parts of my different stories when I tell it, depending on how long of the story I'm sharing, is it wasn't just the financial piece. A lot of you know that I was living in my parents' house. I had a master's degree. I was essentially at the worst place, in my life. I had over 60K in debt. I was hospitalized for anxiety and other issues. And it wasn't how I saw my life going as a mid 20-year-old who, quote unquote, did everything right and checked all the boxes and did what he was supposed to do. So what I'm most proud of and who I'm most passionate about helping and working with, because of my story and because of what I went through, it's not just people that are wanting to win their first government contracts. That's great. We've done that. But if I look at those who I'm most passionate about, and when I look back on those who I've worked with on more of a close setting, it's those who had to overcome some form of adversity, overcome some form of mental judgment, mental not being good enough. When I started in government contracting, I entered a small business in an industry where I didn't necessarily fit the bill. I was an engineer. I was not an engineer. I did not come from an engineering background. I did not think technically or have any sort of technical background. I'm very much a right-brained, creative person who often can just be all over the place and messy sometimes. And, going through my master's degree program, it kind of taught me that side of me is not okay, and it's not useful, and it's not helpful, and it doesn't really have a place in the professional working world. Whereas, before college, I was a person who loved to paint and do comedy and, use my imagination, just be fun and silly. And I kind of got formed into the rigid version of me that I thought would be accepted by society, and more importantly, the government contracting field. So upon entering government contracting, I was met with immediate pushback by my peers, by those that I worked with who happened to be the engineers and the left-brained dominant folks. And I overheard many conversations where they were speaking, here was my desk, and my boss would have just a glass wall, but you could see through it. And in some instances, you could hear through it if you sat right next to it, which is where I did. And you could hear some of the conversations. Having to sit at a desk, listen to people twice your age who are left brain dominant talk about how I don't belong working there, how I don't deserve to work there, how I don't have anything to contribute. And in essence, the message was how I wasn't good enough, was really hard, especially my first 2 years working there, where I didn't have a lot of clout, a lot of say, or anything to stand on or push back against. I just had to kind of accept it. And not having much training in the GovCon field, basically being given a chair and a laptop, and at the time, FBO.gov, Fed BizOps, before the changeover to sam.gov, I just felt so bad about myself. I felt like such a useless human being. I felt so, just useless. And it's not how I grew up. I grew up feeling so optimistic and all these ideas and these creative things and these things that I wanted to do. And I was always passionate about helping people. And to kind of go through that and then further experience that directly from the government side of things as well, in forms of ageism and even slight forms of racism is what I would call it, from contracting officers and GovCon agencies, as me being a 25, 26-year-old company representative who was asked to leave meetings and things that should have never happened to be only replaced with my superiors for my companies. All of that was very hard, but because that was contrasted at the point where I was at the lowest point of my life, I had to suck it up. I had to endure it. I had to absorb it, and I had to internalize it kind of against my will. Eventually, I became very successful. I became very good at what I did, though. After leaving the job, GovKidMethod is the chip on my shoulder. It is me getting the final laugh at the company and the agencies that I worked with during that stage of my life, because I was made to feel so bad about myself. And not only did I win many contracts worth a lot of money, but I was able to see myself in a light where I actually was proud of myself. I knew that no matter what others would say, I had already been, tested in the furnace, steel sharpens steel. And so there's not really anything else more that could be done to me that was going to really hurt me, because it had already been done. And so I'm here showing up for the last 5 years on YouTube for those people who, for whatever reason, your journey can be totally different, but any journeys that have led you to a place of feeling not good enough, these solicitations are too complicated, you're not a technical person, you don't have a professional background, to let you know that you can really do it too. I say GovCon changed my life, it can change yours too. I don't mean that just from a financial standpoint. Government contracting helped me to push against and develop my character traits and who I really am. And who I started out being was not who I ended up being, and who I started out being was not who I ever truly was. And honestly, where I ended up being is not who I truly am either, because we're in process. But there was a significant amount of progress and process and evolution through a very intense, say, 5-year time period where I worked for the small government contractor and cut my teeth in this field before I started working with all of you guys. But that's the sort of background and experience that I bring, and that's who I'm most passionate about working with and looking to make a difference. There's a million different ways to make money. We all know this, but to help you develop into just more of you, the 2.0, the 3.0 version of who you are capable of being is really, really cool. And it's really, really rewarding. And it's what makes everything worthwhile. It's not just about winning contracts and winning the money. It's about becoming the type of person who started out thinking that this was impossible for them to do, and then becoming the person who can do this kind of on autopilot. Guys, there are so many people who are technical, who have the experience, have amazing backgrounds, and they suck at GovCon. When I say they suck, what I mean is they're quitters. They quit after 3 months. They say, oh, every bid is just the lowest price bid. There's no point of even doing this. Or, all of the shiny objects, I won't repeat them in this video, that I speak to, they surmise because it wasn't something that they could do under their terms and the way their brains work in the period of time that they forecast and plan and da-da-da-da-da. All the left brain planny things. I always say, you do that. Plan everything out perfectly on the board. I'm going to go get busy actually doing something and winning actual contracts. So it doesn't have to be perfect. And in fact, it can't be perfect. I always say you don't know what the first contract you're going to win is. So why act as if you do in terms of the formulation and planning of your business? In essence, we have to start somewhere. We have to get started. We have to start messy. It's the only way. You can do as much research as you want, but there will always be a huge gap between research and reality, at least in this field, probably some others as well. So you start sloppy and be okay with it. It's going to challenge your perfectionist tendencies, just like it challenged mine, because there's safety and comfort in perfectionism. It's kind of scary to just throw caution into the wind, to try something and go for it, knowing that it may not be perfect, and have a contracting officer look at it, or risk your pricing being off, or to call a subcontractor. But it's the only place to start. And once you start, you get feedback. You either get feedback vocally, you get it from evaluations, you get it from, did you win, did you lose? You get feedback from, like, just your 10th bid is going to be wildly better than your first bid. So we don't want any of these things to hold ourselves back. We want to expect to be messy, to expect to be bad, and expect to only improve when we get improvement feedback, either from another person or from ourselves, through doing the good work of bidding contracts. Only then can you expect to respond to something that is at such an evolved state that it's worth being a winning offer. We don't expect to start out that way. But there's a lot of people in the space that set that expectation, and they think that they should, and they quit. So I'm here to tell you, and that's not saying anything bad about left brain folks either, but those who want to pigeonhole those of us who don't necessarily look great on paper, those of us who don't have a great background, those of us where this maybe even shouldn't work out. I've worked with hundreds at this point where it has, where they shouldn't have been able to make it, and they did make it, and they quit their jobs, they hired their spouse, like whatever those new small GovCon goals look like. Typically it's that, or a veteran wanting to start with something as they transition out and retire, right? These are kind of like the main things, so that you can eventually start to build financial wealth, legacy, hire people that you care about, give them a job. These are the things that really drive you guys. At least that's what you tell me. And a lot of you perceivably have a lot of things going against you in this, but I'm here to stand out in the space per GovKidMethod, kid, to go against that and say, no, yes, you can. I did. I've worked with hundreds at this point who shouldn't have, but they did. And so can you. So I hope this message finds the right people. A lot of my messages are not popular, and they're not for everybody, but for the people who need to hear them, the feedback is, I feel like you're speaking directly to me. And that's who I hope this message finds.